Hey everyone, Delve here. You can check out my channels here. Today I'm going to go over another Dark Souls offensive stat. This time it's Intelligence, which is the stat governing spells known as sorceries. We'll start with the upsides. The first upside obviously is that you have a wide variety of offensive spells. These really don't differ that much from one another. They are mostly just variations of the exact same attack, just with different damage and cast times. However, if you want to talk about firepower, Intelligence has you covered. You'll tend to do solid damage early, making the first half of the game fairly easy. Not only that, you'll deal ridiculous amounts of damage towards the end of the game as well, making Intelligence arguably the best stat for sheer damage. The next obvious advantage is the fact that your spells are ranged. While this is obvious, it's important to understand that it has some limitations. Spells have a maximum range, which sometimes is shorter than the range at which you can lock onto enemies. However, on the main, despite the jankiness of the range and lock-on mechanics, this is one of the stronger aspects that sorceries has. Intelligence gets some other decent perks, as if it even needed them. You get access to some decent support spells, including the ability to cure poison and toxic. Next, you have access to an extreme variety of weapons. Firstly, through a handful of weapons which have intelligence scaling automatically, including some fairly good ones. And then you also technically have access to practically any weapon you like via magic and enchanted ascensions, which allow you to give an intelligence scaling and magic damage to any weapon which can be upgraded with standard Titanite. This isn't actually very useful overall, since you're simply never going to do more damage with these weapons than with sorceries. And even in scenarios where a weapon is the best way to dispatch an enemy, a normal weapon or a lightning weapon would do just as good a job, while dealing more damage to enemies with magic resistance. Still, it's an option you have, and I'm sure there are scenarios where you can find it useful, so I'll mention it. And lastly, sorceries are extremely flexible. You can easily gain access to basic sorceries and a catalyst as soon as you reach Firelink Shrine, meaning practically any character can make use of sorceries immediately. Not only that, but the next sorcery teacher is also relatively easy to rescue, and can even be rescued before killing a single boss, except Asylum Demon, of course. And of course, sorceries also have access to several weapon buffs. While these can only be used on weapons without elemental ascensions, it means that even a tiny investment in intelligence can make a character using strength or dexterity noticeably stronger. Okay, so intelligence and sorceries have a massive suite of advantages, but there are some minor disadvantages as well. The first one is that sorceries are quite expensive. Not only that, but their effectiveness is based upon your character's intelligence stat, meaning that you have to both pay for these expensive sorceries and then put a significant level investment into the intelligence stat for them to be useful. This makes intelligence a really expensive stat to use, and it also encourages you to walk around with a lot of souls, which is quite risky. The next downside to intelligence is that it's entirely dependent upon the sorcery trainers. Therefore, if you don't know where they are or how to rescue them, then you can't get the best sorceries, and therefore intelligence is a much weaker prospect as far as stats go. There's really only the two, those being Griggs of Vinheim and Big Hat Logan. However, to rescue Logan requires fairly thorough exploration of Sen's Fortress, which would be difficult to do without foreknowledge, so it does have the major downside of being really difficult to use if you're trying to play the game blind or anything like that. The last downside to intelligence is attunement. This is a stat which governs how many spells you can have attuned at once. Realistically, you don't need more than maybe 19 attunement, or maybe 23 if you really want a lot of slots, so it's actually not that bad. But it is a few more levels you have to add on to a character who already has to spend a lot of souls on levels and spells. On the main, I do think that the advantages of intelligence outweigh the downsides considerably. Okay, next we'll talk about crucial sorceries, which means we'll talk about recruiting relevant NPCs as well. The first relevant NPC is Rickard of Vinheim, who is located in the entrance to the New Londo Ruins, meaning that practically any character can make use of his sorceries. This is also the NPC who does magic and enchanted ascensions as well. The next guy is Griggs of Vinheim. He can be rescued in the lower Undead Burg. This can technically be accomplished before killing a single boss if you start the game with the Master Key. Otherwise, you'll need both the key to the lower Undead Burg, which can be found in the Undead Parish, and the key that can be bought off of the merchant in the Undead Burg. Once you do free him, he'll return to Firelink Shrine and start selling you better sorceries. The obvious sorceries you want are Great Soul Arrow, and also Great Heavy Soul Arrow. He also sells Magic Weapon. This is a weapon buff, but it only requires 10 intelligence to cast, meaning that practically any character can benefit from sorcery right out of the box. Lastly, he sells the Bellowing Dragon Crest Ring. This can make your sorceries quite a bit stronger. The next sorcery trainer is Big Hat Logan, who can be rescued in Sen's Fortress. This involves breaking open the wall to him, and then finding the key to his cage, which is at the top, near the secret merchant. or you can use the Master Key if you start with that. He then goes back to Firelink Shrine and he'll sell you Soul Spear, one of the main damage spells for the rest of the game. The next NPC of interest is Dusk of Ulasil. She can be rescued in the Darkroot Basin. After killing the Hydra, quit and reload the game, and there will be a golden crystal golem. Kill this and it will free Dusk of Ulasil, although be careful not to hit her. You will then be able to summon her, and she'll sell a variety of support sorceries. They're not particularly useful, but they're okay. She'll also sell the Ulasil Ivory Catalyst, a powerful catalyst for characters with low intelligence. Once you've summoned her, reload the game and return to the spot where the Golden Crystal Golem was. Here you will find the Crown of Dusk, which will increase the damage of your sorceries, pyromancies, and miracles, although it will lower your magic defenses. Once you reach Anor Londo, you can obtain Great Magic Weapon by knocking down the chandelier on the rafters. Again, these weapon buff spells are fairly crazy, this one only requiring a paltry 15 intelligence to cast. After you've placed the Lord Vessel, the place you want to head to next is the Duke's Archives. Logan will be trapped here in the prison area, and the key can be found in a chest in the last room before the outside area. Once you rescue him, he'll move towards the exit and sell a few new sorceries, notably Crystal Soul Spear and Crystal Magic Weapon. Additionally, once Logan has left Firelink Shrine, Griggs will now sell an extra copy of Soul Spear as well. After you've killed Seath and bought all of Logan's spells, he will go crazy and leave his stuff behind, including his useful catalyst. He can then be located in the room where Seath kills you in the first encounter. Killing him will grant the invaluable Tin Crystallization Catalyst, as well as the White Dragon Breath sorcery. Note that Crystal Soul Spear has an intelligence requirement of 44, so you'll definitely want to have that much intelligence. White Dragon Breath also has an intelligence requirement of 50, but it's not anywhere near as useful as Crystal Soul Spear, so you don't have to reach 50 intelligence if you don't want to. At this point, you have all the tools you need to defeat every boss in the game, but there's still one more notable spell. This can be located in the Chasm of the Abyss. It's the infamous Dark Bead. A close-range Dark Bead will deal massive damage to any enemy hit with it, and it's great against any and all bosses. So there's the most relevant spells and catalysts. But like I mentioned earlier, some weapons scale within the intelligence stat as well. Two of these are actually quite notable. The first is the Moonlight Butterfly Horn. This can be obtained by trading the soul of the Moonlight Butterfly and a +10 spear with the Giant Blacksmith in Anor Londo. This spear is actually fairly ridiculous and might actually be the best spear in the game. It has great scaling and intelligence, low stat requirements, long range, and it isn't particularly heavy. Best of all, it deals pure magic damage, which is unusual for these kinds of weapons. Generally, they deal both physical damage and magical damage, which is really terrible because enemy resistances block both of them. So basically, if a weapon does split damage, you never want to use it unless it deals an absurd amount of damage or something. So it's a really, really strange weapon and a really good weapon too. The next one is the Moonlight Greatsword. This can be obtained by breaking off the tip of Seath's tail. The easiest way to do this is to get him to break his own crystal, sprint for his tail, and then use an untargeted Soul Spear or Crystal Soul Spear. This weapon has stat requirements, weight, and moveset similar to the Claymore, scales well with intelligence, and deals pure magic damage, making it an extremely good weapon. But it also comes with a bonus to magic defense, so it's probably my favorite weapon in the entire game, even if it will never actually deal more damage than sorceries like Crystal Soul Spear. I find it very amusing that a stat as powerful as intelligence also gets two extremely unique and powerful weapons, so you really have no shortages of tools and options here if you are making use of intelligence. Lastly, I'll talk about stat distribution. I recommend spending your souls on spells whenever possible, although I generally wouldn't recommend losing the souls from a boss kill. In the case of, say, like killing Quelaag, I wouldn't necessarily hold on to the souls until I get back to Firelink. I might just spend them right then and there on intelligence. There's really no shame in pumping intelligence to about 44. As for attunement, you can of course play it by ear. Having maybe 3 or 4 slots by the time you meet Griggs isn't a bad idea. From there, you can get intelligence to 50 if you want to try out White Dragon Breath, but simply pumping health and stamina isn't a bad idea either. 12 strength will get you the Moonlight Butterfly Horn, and 16 strength, 10 dexterity will get you the Moonlight Greatsword and Eagle Shield. The last stat to mention is dexterity, and a whopping 45 dexterity, your offensive spells will cast faster. I don't really recommend this, but it is something to consider if you want to do New Game Plus. Lastly, we'll talk about rings. Other than the Bellowing Dragon Crest ring, the usual suspects apply here. Ring of Favor and Protection, Havel's Ring, and the Dark Woodgrain Ring are all really great options for basically any character. I personally don't recommend the attunement slot related rings. There are several rings in the game that give you free attunement slots, but you really have enough. 4 to 5 attunement slots is plenty. But if you are interested in them, there's one in the Duke's Archives, and there's also one in the Catacombs. and they're maybe not the worst option. Okay, so there's the intelligence guide. Intelligence is a really strong stat, and it can make the game much easier. However, it's a more expensive build option, and finding the trainers and buying the best spells can be tricky depending on how well you know the game. So maybe it's not the best option for new players, or maybe it is the best option for new players. I'm not really sure. But it's my personal favorite stat in the game, and I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching.